Welcome to our Cybersafe Digest weekly podcast, episode 33. Each week, we will unfold the most recent cyber attacks and will provide you with valuable insights on how to shield your business from these threats, along with practical steps and tips to enhance your cybersecurity.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Cybersafe Digest, episode 33. I am Martin Roberts, Managing Director of NewWays, and I'm here with my colleague,
Toby Stevenson, Chief Technology Officer at NewWays.
Okay, Toby, you informed me before we started that you're suffering from the effects of the high pollen count. Could we actually?
Yeah, well, that's the side effect, isn't it? That's the downside to a bit of sunshine. Yeah. So apologies if I sound a little hoarse or coffee or spluttery throughout, but I'm ploughing on, doing my best.
If it's any comfort to you, I feel great. So, okay, Toby, I think we again, let's talk about our target listeners, folks. Thank you very much for listening, everybody. If you're a CEO, CFO, or person responsible for IT in your organization, but don't necessarily execute it, we hope this podcast is for you. We hope to demystify some of the technologies and terminologies used. And we also like to highlight those areas of your infrastructure, your approach, whatever, which maybe need your attention. And because we witnessed this last week, we thought it'd be a good time to talk about Wi-Fi, because it's one of those things I used to call a little bit Wild West. Over the past few years, we've managed to bring all the infrastructure into a managed service. Certainly, we have as a supplier, and we know your IT departments have been growing it all. But Wi-Fi can be still a bit Wild West because of the standards, but more importantly, Toby, I think it's because people can go out and implement it very quickly and very cheaply, but not necessarily with the oversight that's perhaps required. I don't know what your view of that is.
Yeah, no, very much so, and it kind of steps into that world slightly of shadow IT again, things that are happening that you don't know about, have no control over, and no security around. So yeah, it's definitely an area that is can be problematic, and as you say, the accessibility of cheap consumer grade Wi-Fi that operates alongside, let's call it, a more business orientated, a more business focused solution compounds the problem. So it's not uncommon to see networks where there is professionally installed Wi-Fi access points around the building, and then there's a little £20 unit from Amazon that someone's stuck in the corner because it was a bit of a dead spot. And yes, it's the same kind of equipment that you would perhaps install in your home, which is absolutely fine and it works, but it's a piece of kit that you don't know about. It's a piece of kit that you can't see or secure, and in many cases, the way that it's working, although it does just about work, it's actually subtracting from the overall experience of the Wi-Fi network, and in fact, it can actually be damaging to the rest of the Wi-Fi network because of the way that it operates.
Yes. Now, in theory, if you were in an organization and you suddenly found that dead spot in the corner of the office or the warehouse or whatever, out in the car park, in theory, you shouldn't just be able to plug in a wireless router, because surely your systems would recognize that it's sitting there. But that's not always the case, is it?
No, it's absolutely not. And particularly the lower end of the spectrum, they don't really have the capabilities of identifying these things. So some of it is around just good manual process. Not saying you have to go and buy the most expensive Wi-Fi solution just in case someone wants to go down to Argos and buy a cheap Wi-Fi repeater. You can substitute most of the control with just a robust manual policy of don't do it all or else. Will stand on your neck or something like that.
Because what you want to do is, and again, this we talked about shadow IT a couple of episodes ago, and how people through necessity and a desire to do things better. There's no malicious intent on behalf of it. They just want to make their business better, and they think by going and doing this, they are making the business better, but they don't necessarily think beyond their own realm. that, I can understand why if you were working in the corner of the warehouse or in offices where the signal's not very good and it's slowing you down or your colleagues down, you'd want to do something. But the reality is you might not understand the risk. So let's think about the risks of there am I thinking, the signal here is not very good, or my computer doesn't operate very well because I keep losing the network, or it's slow, which sometimes is just perception or anything else. So I go out down to, as you say, Argus, but let's just say there are other retailers available. You buy that access point or that extender. We'll talk about the difference between those two in a few moments. You plug it in, and suddenly things seem to improve for you. But of course, that can have an impact on the existing wireless network if it is there. We've got things about handoff between access points. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So one of the first things that you may run into is difficulties roaming. So if you have a wireless network and it's all from the same manufacturer, it's all professionally installed and configured, then the chances are that that will have some kind of handover capability. So as you are moving around with your device, you can maintain a signal as you wander. So if you imagine an office space and there's 2, 3, 4 access points in that office space, as you wander around that, naturally you want to be connected to the access point that is closest to you, so you have the greatest signal strength and thus the greatest speed and performance. And a cohesive, properly installed, properly set up system will allow that to happen. So as you wander around, there are mechanisms in place that allow your handset to hand off and connect to another device in a relatively seamless way, so that if you're on a phone call, for example, the call doesn't get broken, it hands over gracefully. If you are operating on a repeater system, or you're connected to a different Wi-Fi network that has the same name as the corporate Wi-Fi network, which is the other way that you can get around this issue with multiple different types of access points and different vendors, is that what happens is your device has to lose its connection and then reconnect to something else. So what can happen then is that if you're in a phone call or a video call or something like that, there is a chance that that will get severed while you then reconnect. So the end user experience can be poorer in some situations compared to having a properly managed and implemented system.
Okay, so that's there's a practical reason to do things properly. Then we have got another issue, which is about setting up appropriate network access to the different parties that may use it. So clearly, we've got people who work for the business who are handling sensitive data and sorts like that should be on one network, or should be traveling over that. But a lot of people don't actually even bother to set up, even though even the cheap kit has the ability to set up guest networks.
Yep.
With different privileges and access. People either don't think to set it up or don't get around to setting it because they're doing the day job and they've got other things to do. And by the way, they're not IT; they're just trying to help make things better.
Yes. So yeah, definitely, yeah, and I think those kind of guest networks they're normally standard functionality of even the most basic systems. They're well worth doing because you want to try and control the devices that you have no knowledge of from being anywhere near the devices that are important to you, which are your company PCs, your servers, or your data and things like that. So having those separate guest networks, which are then isolated from each other. So it's not just a different name of a network, not a different Wi-Fi. It physically is unable to connect. So if you connect to the guest network, you can't hit the servers. All you can do is get some internet access, which is effectively all that a guest needs anyway. It's a convenience rather than anything else. So, and yet adding on repeaters and things like that can break some of those things because they're not necessarily bound by the same rules.
Sure.
So that's another area where ad hoc additions or unsanctioned additions to the Wi-Fi network can be problematic. I think one of the big ones for me, and it's kind of becoming more and more prevalent now when things like Cyber Essentials mandate all of these things, but it's if you've got a Wi-Fi repeater in the corner of the office that nobody knows about, whose responsibility is it to update it? and change the default passwords on it and all of those sorts of things. If you go and buy this 20, £30 box from a high street retailer, there is a possibility, although the vendors are getting better, but there is a possibility they've all got the same default password.
Yeah, for sure.
So if you can go and find that device, then you can easily log into it. And then when you log into it, you can then change the configuration, gain further access into the network. Now, these are all a little bit James Bondy type scenarios, but these are all absolute risks that could possibly be there. And part of the problem is if you don't understand that these things could affect you, you can't try and protect, you can't decide whether actually they're relevant to you in the first place, and you can't decide how you mitigate against them. So I think this whole, and it's the real area that shallow IT is the problem, really, is that it's things that the business doesn't know about. They can't make a judgment on the risk that they introduce to the business. And in the case of these Wi-Fi repeaters, access points, things, who's responsible for updating them? Who's responsible for validating the configuration is sound and secure and safe? And unlike the wired network, which requires you to gain physical access into the building to plug into the network, a wireless access extends past the boundaries of the building. You can sit in the car park or in the building across the street or in the coffee shop across the road, and you might still be able to see the Wi-Fi. If it's poorly configured, it might be possible that someone can gain access to your inside of your network, and that might then find it very difficult to know that because you might be they might be connecting onto something that actually isn't under IT's management purview. They don't even know that it exists. So how can they monitor for who's accessing it?
And I think one of the things that people, you talked about the James Bond type scenario where you're thinking of the man with a special island with special things to get into your networks. Actually, it's actually much cheaper than that. You don't need an island in the Pacific somewhere, hollowed out of a volcano. There's kit out there which people can buy and sit outside of your premises and scan that wireless network and then get into it.
Yeah, and I think that wireless attacks are really, really interesting because there's very, very little data to substantiate that these are actually a threat at all. And I don't know why that is, because there's data around virtually every other attack vector, but Wi-Fi seems to be conspicuous by its absence, I think, in terms of how much data there is around, somebody got hacked because of the Wi-Fi. It's often somebody got hacked because they didn't have MFA, or somebody got hacked because they had rubbish passwords, or because they didn't patch, or.
Yeah.
But it's very rare to see anything that says they got hacked because of the Wi-Fi. Now, we did some work with one of the local police constabularies a while back, and they were talking around a particular case. And I'm not going to mention the whys and the wherefores because it may still be in process. But ultimately, what happened is that this is one of the few occasions I can find or recall of seeing something being directly attributable to Wi-Fi. An organisation let a system administrator go, so somebody that was responsible for IT, let them go. This guy didn't take it particularly well. A week or two later, he was still not taking it very well, and he sat in the car park, and they hadn't changed the Wi-Fi codes, and he got onto the network, and because they hadn't changed the Wi-Fi codes, or I guess they hadn't even revoked his access, so he got onto the network and caused all sorts of damage. And so the police were involved because it was criminal damage, but that kind of showed that he didn't have to get into the building to do it. He could sit relatively out of the way, thinking he was being clever in hiding his track because he wasn't on any CCTV because he was round the corner and all that kind of stuff. But attribution to Wi-Fi is really, really difficult to do. It's difficult to find the stats, but it stands to reason that it must be relevant because it's advertising the inside of your network outside of your building.
Yeah, and I guess we know about the limitations of physical access in terms of plugging into sockets and walls, which is not an unknown method of doing it.
Absolutely, yeah.
However, it's really easy. It's really easy. Now, so I suppose one of the things I know we do, and I'm very careful about, is actually in some of these wireless network devices, you can actually they're sophisticated, but they have the ability to switch on the access times.
Yeah, and this is something that I would absolutely recommend. If your Wi-Fi solution is capable of doing it, you don't do it already, tailor its availability to when you need to use it. So if you want to use the Wi-Fi in the office from 9 to 5, set it so that it's 9 to 5 Monday to Friday. There's no point in the Wi-Fi being on overnight or at the weekend. Just turn it off, and that way anyone that is sitting in the car outside or driving by scanning for wireless that's available for perhaps a later attack is just going to keep driving on. And I think
Yeah.
that's a really useful thing. Yeah, it adds some degree of security. It must do, because you're affecting availability of network access, and it doesn't cost anything in most cases. It's normally a feature that just needs to be enabled. And again, you don't see these things if they're on unmanaged devices. So again, that would be actually a really useful thing, a really useful way of surfacing that maybe there are some rogue access points in the world on your network if you don't have other ways of identifying them. Set a schedule, wait for half an hour either side of the schedule, and see if you can still see the network. If you can still see the network, chances are there's something that's pretending to be part of your network that shouldn't really be there.
And that's another risk. Sometimes people do pretend to be your network to gain access to your network. So other people connect to it thinking it's a legitimate one, but it isn't.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And it stands to reason. Again, this is a technique that would be used to great effect to attack and scam individuals. Data on how many is scarce, but it seems completely plausible and totally expected that should be a thing, a fake access point, the fake wireless network that is masquerading as one thing.
Okay, so I suppose the takeaway from this, as always, we like to go on these is remember that these wireless access points, even add-ons, even if it's a rush purchase because we're trying to facilitate some activity for a project, whatever, it's still strategic. It's a strategic IT. It should be part of your overall approach to IT, and it needs to be managed. If you don't manage it, you've got a problem, potential problem. And then and actually advertising this fact to your people, and particularly those people who are the go-ahead guys and girls who like to get things done. Make sure everybody in your organization knows that you don't add anything to the organization without the say-so of the person responsible for IT.
Definitely.
And more importantly, the reasons why, not because we're being awkward and we don't want to make your life more convenient, it's that there